For the first time since 2014, a new generation of RAM is here. DDR5 promises faster performance and more throughput, and Kingston's Fury Renegade series offers top-of-the-line cooling, overclocking potential, and customizable RGB. Click the link below to check it out, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, great to see you all again. Welcome back. Thanks for stopping by. I have had a fantastic week. Thank you for asking. Got to interview Josh Sawyer as part of the Frames Per Second podcast. This guy was the game director for Fallout New Vegas and newly released Pentiment. He was intimidatingly intelligent. Afterwards, I was like, man, I need to read more books. So I went back to my collection and picked up one that I only got halfway through, a book about the making of Back to the Future. As you can see, I'm a man of fine literary taste. Speaking of fine taste, I also got to review Evil West. Absolute banger, that one, though not everyone agrees. More on that later in the show. More than anything else though, I just got to take a bit of a break since the worst of the release season is behind us, and I got to go outside and feel sunlight on my skin, and then go back inside because I live in Australia and like 3 minutes of sun here can be deadly. The year is starting to wind down. Can you believe we are nearly in December? Holy shit. But I tell you what's not winding down, video game news. Still plenty of it to come, so hold on to your butts. Let's do it. Let's kick off with that Marty versus Mick showdown that spilled out onto the headlines last week. After Marty Stratton of id Software posted to Reddit accusing Doom composer Mick Gordon of failing to meet deadlines and being generally difficult to work with, Mick didn't respond to those allegations, leaving most of us to assume that Marty was telling the truth. That was nearly 2 years ago, mind you, but last week Mick took to Twitter to post a lengthy rebuttal packed full of receipts. He alleges that id made impossible work demands, that Marty was toxic to work with, that Mick was forced to endlessly crunch, and that he still hasn't been paid in full for his work. When shit hit the fan and Marty put up that Reddit post, Mick worked behind the scenes to sort the matter out, demanding the post be removed. ZeniMax, parent company of Bethesda, owner of id Software, refused to remove it, instead offering Mick a six-figure settlement on condition that he never air his side of the story. Mick clearly told them to stick that gag order where the sun don't shine, and he then took the fight to the court of public opinion. Well, Bethesda's PR team, in their infinite wisdom, dropped this banger this week. Quote, "The recent post by Mick Gordon both mischaracterized and misrepresented the team at id Software, the development of Doom Eternal, Marty Stratton, and Chad Mossholder with a one-sided and unjust account of an irreparable professional relationship. We are aware of the details and history in this matter and unequivocally support Marty, Chad, and the team at id Software. We reject the distortion of the truth and selective presentation of incomplete facts. We stand ready with full and complete documented evidence to disclose in an appropriate venue as needed." The statements posted online have incited harassment and threats of violence against Marty, Chad, and the id Software team. Any threats of harassment directed towards members of our team will be met with swift and appropriate action to protect their health and safety. We remain incredibly proud of id's previous collaborations with Mick Gordon and ask that fans refrain from reaching conclusions based on his account and, more importantly, from attacking any of the individuals mentioned on either side, including Marty, Chad, and Mick, end quote. So, this is a really shitty statement. I don't know what's true and what's not in this circumstance, though I do note that Mick Gordon provided a lot of evidence to back up his claims, and he's not being remotely cagey about details. Bethesda's PR, on the other hand, are like, nah bruh, trust us, he's lying. Furthermore, for Bethesda to call Mick's response one-sided is bullshit. It's literally Mick's side of a story that got its start as a Reddit post from Marty Stratton, who put out his side of the story on Reddit of all places, a place with absolutely zero scrutiny or guardrails for a discussion like that. And then Bethesda have the audacity to talk about how Mick's post incited harassment and threats of violence against Marty, Chad, and id. Where was that energy when Marty dropped his bomb on Reddit? You think Mick wasn't fielding plenty of harassment and threats at the time? You think that dude's career wasn't effectively ended by that post? Again, I don't know what's true here. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it's very hypocritical for Bethesda PR to take this indignant tone when Mick defends himself in public. You want to disagree with the facts? Go ahead, but you should probably front up with more than just a JPEG posted to Twitter. Sticking with this theme of corporate disputes, we've got an update on Microsoft's pitch to buy Activision Blizzard. That's right, that old chestnut. To this point, we've heard repeatedly that Phil Spencer and Xbox have had no intention of taking Call of Duty off PlayStation, which is all well and good to say, but the facts don't support that. Earlier, Jim Ryan of Sony clarified that Phil had offered a 3-year extension to the current deal, which is due to expire around 2026. Jim publicly turned that down, saying it was unacceptable and would disadvantage PlayStation gamers too much. Since then, more and more scrutiny has been brought to bear on this acquisition deal, with both the British CMA and the EU Commission announcing more thorough investigations into the matter. In that time, Microsoft have accused Sony of misleading regulators by overstating the importance of Call of Duty, but Jim Ryan disagrees. He said Microsoft is, quote, a tech giant with a long history of dominating industries, and that it is highly likely that the choices gamers have today will disappear if this deal goes ahead, end quote. This appears to have forced Phil back to the negotiating table, as the New York Times is reporting that Phil has now offered Sony a 10-year deal, guaranteeing that Call of Duty remains on PlayStation consoles. The New York Times says that Sony has not commented on the deal. Is 10 years enough? Do Jim Ryan and Sony look unreasonable for turning that down? To be honest, it doesn't really matter. Right now, momentum is building against this deal, with two major regulatory bodies citing concerns, conducting deep dive investigations, and the New York Times is suggesting that the FTC may be preparing to challenge it in some way. The current stock price of Activision Blizzard also suggests that the broader market doesn't have faith in it to go through, since the shares are still selling at a discount versus Microsoft's proposed offer price. Sony have Microsoft on the ropes here. Their strategy is working, and it seems unlikely that they'd be willing to step back from that, even if Phil Spencer promised Call of Duty until the heat death of the universe. Sony will keep the pressure on, hoping to torpedo this entire deal, so we're not getting off this roller coaster anytime soon. Stay tuned. Activision Blizzard's desire for this deal to go through likely took on new urgency this week when Blizzard effectively broke up with China. An investor briefing from Blizzard announced that they were terminating their partnership with NetEase. NetEase is the second largest gaming company in China and effectively Blizzard's ticket to ride, since Western companies can't release games there without the assistance of a Chinese-based publishing partner. Blizzard and NetEase have been working together since 2008 and have jointly published stuff like World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Diablo, and Hearthstone. All of those will become technically inaccessible to Chinese players after January 23rd next year, when the publishing agreement expires. It would really suck if you're a Chinese WoW player getting all hyped for Dragonflight after putting 14 years into an account, and suddenly next year you won't be able to play it at all. Still, VPNs exist, and Chinese gamers are generally pretty good at finding workarounds for geo-blocks. Hopefully they can still get their fix. As for why this partnership has collapsed, no one really knows at this point, though NetEase's head of partnerships did post a rather cryptic message to LinkedIn, quote, as a gamer who spent tens of thousands of hours in the world of Azeroth, StarCraft, and Overwatch, I feel heartbroken as I will no longer have access to my account and memories next year. One day, when what has happened behind the scenes could be told, developers and gamers will have a whole new level of understanding of how much damage a jerk can make. Feel terrible for players who lived in these worlds, end quote. Unclear who exactly he's speaking about, but odds are it's Bobby Kotick because A, he's a CEO of Blizzard, and B, he's a jerk, so it all lines up. Blizzard weren't the only company putting out investor updates this week. Embracer dropped one as well, and it was a low-key doozy. You might recall that Embracer have been on a buying spree these past few years, splashing billions as they gobble up all manner of mid-sized studio, while always reiterating that their appetite would not be satiated and that the acquisitions would continue until there was nothing left to consume. That bullishness is at an end though, with CEO Lars Wingfors declaring that the economic outlook had darkened in recent times and that the company must adapt. They announced an internal review of their business that could lead them to spin off parts of itself into separate, independent listed entities, and they also suggested that investment would slow as they reorient. Part of that reorientation is prompted by middling performance of some of their key titles. Not to put all the blame on Saints Row, but that's certainly a good example. That sold around 1 million units, which was well below expectations, owing largely to its negative critical reception. As a result, Embracer announced that the Saints Row developer Volition are going to become a part of Gearbox, makers of Borderlands and Battleborn. Remember that one? Volition will continue to exist as an entity, but it will now be led by Gearbox's senior management. Kind of sad to see a studio lose its independence like that, but yeah, Saints Row was not good. And if some new leadership is able to help dig that studio out of that hole, then that's gotta be a good thing. One final tidbit is that Gearbox now owns the rights to Risk of Rain. After publishing the first 2 games, they announced that they had purchased the rights outright, meaning that a third game is all but certain. It's likely that the same dev team will be behind it, and if Gearbox can give them even more resources to shoot for something more ambitious, then that's probably a good thing. Risk of Rain is awesome, I love it, and I'm very glad to know that it has a future. Life comes at you fast if you're the guy that created Sonic. Last year, Yuji Naka put out one of the worst games of 2021 in the form of Balan Wonderworld, a game so bad that it would eventually lead to a court battle between Naka and publisher Square Enix, with Naka claiming that he was forced out of the project early and unable to complete it to his satisfaction, negatively impacting his reputation given how poorly the game was received. Unclear what exactly went down there, but one thing's for certain, the problems in Balan Wonderworld were so deeply baked in that no amount of extra dev time could have fixed them, so it's a little hard to take Naka at face value on that one. The nasty court battle over, Naka did what anyone would do. bought approximately $45,000 worth of Square Enix shares just a few days before they were said to announce the existence of a new Dragon Quest title. If that sounds suspect to you, then you might work in Japanese law enforcement, because Yuji Naka, creator of Sonic, was arrested last week on suspicion of insider trading. His arrest comes as a number of other Square Enix staff were arrested for the same thing, with authorities alleging that they all had knowledge of the game's impending announcement and were hoping to make a quick buck on a share price that might tick up after the news went public. No response from Naka yet confirming or denying these allegations, but it caps off a really shitty year for a once beloved game maker who seems to have fallen from grace. We'll no doubt hear more about this as those court proceedings go ahead. Circling back to some Xbox stuff briefly, you guys remember Project Keystone, that cloud streaming stick or dedicated device thing that was rumored a while back? This is something Microsoft has been talking about for a while now, a USB stick or a dongle or a small device that could plug directly into your TV, and it would serve as your gateway into the Xbox ecosystem, allowing you to stream games through their xCloud platform. On more than one occasion, word on the street was that an official announcement for this device was imminent, but that appears to be less likely than ever after Phil Spencer himself said that Microsoft got close to a release, but weren't happy with the cost of production. Speaking on the Dakota podcast, Uncle Phil said that the device, which he actually teased on his shelf at one point, totally worked and it was a great product, but that they couldn't get the price down to a point far enough away from Xbox Series S. Quote, "With Keystone, we're still focused on it and when we can get the right costs, but when you've got Series S at $299 and like during the holidays you'll see some price promotion, you'll obviously have Series X higher. I think in order for a streaming-only box to make sense, the price delta to S has to be pretty significant," end quote. He would go on to explain that he told the team to direct their efforts towards an Xbox TV app, which was a success, and it's now being rolled out in newly built Samsung TVs. With that sort of thing possible, you have to wonder what the business case is for a dedicated device, but there can sometimes be benefit in terms of Wi-Fi strength or controller signal reliability when you're using a dedicated device. For now though, Project Keystone is on ice with no sign it'll be coming back anytime soon. A quick lightning round to finish off the news block. Elden Ring, and I know this is going to shock everyone, but Elden Ring is popular and it sold a bunch of copies. Bandai Namco announced last week that Elden Ring has sold 17.5 million copies, making it the fastest selling multi-platinum game to come out of Japan ever. Congrats Miyazaki, now get to work on that DLC please. In similar news, Guardians of the Galaxy just celebrated 8 million players. Many of those would not have purchased the title since the game did end up on both Xbox Game Pass and PS Plus, but it is fantastic that so many people got to enjoy this one, especially since it appears to be a one-shot, with Eidos Montreal now hard at work on a new IP and with a Deus Ex game planned after that. A damn shame to know this franchise won't continue. We get like 85 Marvel movies and TV shows, but only like 2 good games. It's not fair. I still do not yet dare to dream, but every day it becomes harder to resist the temptation, because this week Crystal Dynamics were out there flapping their gums about a potential Legacy of Kain revival. They put out a survey recently asking for input on what they should do with the franchise now that they own it again, and the survey garnered 100,000 responses. Crystal Dynamics were surprised at the response rate, saying, quote, "In the past, we found that surveys typically get between 1,000 and 3,000 responses, but when we asked folk about Legacy of Kain, we received over 100,000 responses. Rest assured, we hear you loudly and clearly, and we will continue to update you on the what-if possibilities ahead of Legacy of Kain in the future," end quote. Little do they know that 99,000 of those 100,000 responses were just me and my bot accounts. I'm glad to have done my part, and if we do get a sequel or a remake, you'll all have me to thank. You're welcome. So, what got announced or delayed this week? Well, for those waiting on the next-gen update for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, your wait should be ending just in time for Christmas. The official Twitter account for The Witcher series announced last week the update for PS5 and Xbox Series consoles will arrive on December 14th. CD Projekt Red says the update will include, quote, "ray tracing support, faster load times on consoles, as well as a variety of mods integrated into the experience," end quote. Interestingly, it will also receive a smattering of new content related to the Witcher TV show, but you gotta guess that's just some armor or something. We'll find out for sure later this week when CD Projekt Red host a live stream showcasing the update. Stay tuned for that one soon. The fight for the next Destiny killer is not done. We've got the first Descendant coming sometime soon, though that's looking pretty rough. And a new one to add to the list is Project LLL. Not a great perfect name for a video game. But anyway, this one comes from MMO maker NCSoft, and it's looking pretty snazzy. Gameplay shows a cloaked character running through a dilapidated subway system, shooting a bunch of bad guys before exiting to an outside area and completely dominating a much larger firefight with a ton of action going down on screen. A few cool gadgets in the mix, like a Predator-style shoulder cannon that seems to have multiple modes of firepower, and a jetpack that's used to scale up a couple of floors, and we even see the ability to hack into giant mechs and steal them from their pilots. Love that. This looks interesting, but it's too early for any sort of definitive take. One to keep an eye on for much later down the track though, since we don't have any word on release timings or platforms, but you get the feeling it isn't anytime soon. Superfuse is an isometric action RPG that just got an early access release date, January 31st next year. This one did very well during the most recent Steam Next Fest, and with a story-driven campaign, procedurally generated levels, solo or co-op play, and tons of loot, this is looking like Diablo crossed with Borderlands. Something about it just looks pretty great, I'm into it, and I'll certainly be checking it out, though admittedly, its launch window is a little ill-timed, given that it's basically February 2023, and that month is kind of packed. Not sure if I've mentioned that before. Final announcement this week is for Broforce Forever. Remember Broforce? No? Maybe that's because it released back in 2014. It was a 2D platformer that included cinematic legends like Rambro, Indiana Brones, and Bromocob. Were any of these real licensed characters? No, but Devolver didn't get sued, so obviously they played their legal cards right to pull this off. For some unknown reason, Broforce is getting an update. There's few details out at the moment, but the developer is saying that it's the biggest update to Broforce yet, and will feature new bros, new missions, and new freedoms, whatever that means. No date for this yet, but it is planned for early 2023. Two delay announcements this week. The first is for Dead Island 2, the game that just keeps on giving when it comes to announcements and delays. Meant to ship in early February, the game will not arrive now until April 28th. A fairly chunky delay that the Dead Island Twitter account tried to downplay as just 12 short weeks. I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. We've already waited what feels like 100 years for this game, so what's another 3 months? After switching developers a few times and a couple of false starts, we will finally be getting our hands on this thing next year, and that's still a good thing. If for no other reason, then we can finally stop wondering what the hell is going on with this thing. The other delay announcement was for indie game Forever Skies, which was meant to launch into early access this year, but has now been pushed into early 2023. No specific date yet. The developer posted a very thorough explanation on what they're working on in the meantime, including things like more customization, deeper location variety, as well as continuing to build on their, quote, scientific approach to survival, end quote. I recommend putting this one on your wish list actually. It's looking pretty rad and it's heartening to see the developers taking their time with it. Final announcement relates to my favorite open world video game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now obviously, 300 hours with Valhalla is not enough, and the feature that I was clamoring for more than any other was New Game Plus. I want to complete Assassin's Creed Valhalla not once, but multiple times, as do we all, of course. That is why a New Game Plus mode was such a highly requested feature, but damn it if Ubisoft didn't break our hearts. For this week, they announced that Valhalla will not get a New Game Plus mode because they said that there was no way to implement it in a way that would feel, quote, unique and rewarding, end quote. I totally agree with them on that one. This announcement comes along with the news that post-launch support for Valhalla will end with the final chapter update launching soon, and also the fact that Valhalla will arrive on Steam on December 7th, after some 2 years of being exclusive to Ubisoft's awful PC launcher and Epic's equally bad PC storefront. An interesting pivot for Ubisoft, and you have to wonder if it presages a more wholesale move to Gaben's platform. We'll find out when Ubi ships its next AAA banger, Skull and Bones, currently scheduled for the 9th of March next year, so based on its current delayed track record, it should arrive sometime in 2026. So what came out last week? Well, first up we had Somerville, a new release from some of the talent behind Inside and Limbo, so it shouldn't be too surprising that it was fairly well received, although not nearly as well as the two games it was clearly inspired by. So on Steam, it's sitting at a mixed 59%, with a lot of reviews pointing to some very wonky PC performance, which I experienced myself, in fact. On OpenCritic, it's sitting at a far more healthy 72, which isn't bad, but it's nothing special either. True Gaming gave it an 8, saying, quote, Somerville is an excellent start for Jumpship. It might not be another classic like Limbo or Inside, but it was close to being one, a must-buy for fans of the genre, end quote. On the other hand, you've got reviews like Game Central's 5 out of 10, which call it a, quote, disappointing follow-up to Limbo and Inside that lacks the same complexity of plot and puzzles, and yet struggles surprisingly poorly with the move to 3D, end quote. Like I said last week, I did put some time into this one, but I had to put it down as I just found it too clunky, frustrating, unclear, etc. Its visual splendor given priority over visual clarity, to the great detriment of puzzles and pacing. But hey, this one is on Game Pass, so you can try it for yourself and make up your own mind. Call of Duty Warzone 2.0 2.0 hit all platforms bar the Switch last week, and it has already been subject to one of the most intense review bombing campaigns of the year. Only 34% of the reviews on Steam are positive, with common complaints being clunky UI, connection issues, and other gripes about core game mechanics. To be honest, it's hard to get a read on popular sentiment for this one, since user scores in the opening weeks of a free-to-play live service game are usually pretty wild, but clearly at least a few things are off kilter. No critic reviews for this one yet, as it's still early days, so we'll likely circle back on this one next week. Just briefly, Spider-Man Miles arrived on PC last week, and just like its predecessor, it's a great PC port. 94% very positive on Steam right now, so PC players can grab this one with confidence. A very worthwhile pickup even if you've recently played through the first game, though do be aware that this one is a lot shorter this time around. Man, Supermassive just can't catch a break with their Dark Pictures series. The latest entry, The Devil in Me, arrived last week on all platforms bar the Switch, and this one seems to have languished in the mid territory the same way the others have. Steam reviews are actually pretty brutal, with only 53% of Steam reviews rating it positively, but it does sit at a much higher fair 74 on OpenCritic. Some reviews, like the 5 out of 10 from Shack News, say that, quote, although its added gameplay features make for a more interactive experience, they hardly break the mold and were poorly executed. Technical issues tarnish the experience overall, end quote. Yet the 8.8 out of 10 from Gaming Nexus calls The Devil in Me the best entry in the anthology yet, saying, quote, with an original story and some show-stopping sequences, the game is a step up for the series, despite some minor technical and animation issues. Fans of the franchise or horror in general should not hesitate to pick this one up, end quote. These story-driven horror adventure games clearly haven't been for everyone, even when they've been at their best, but I guess enough people must be buying them to justify Supermassive continuing to churn them out. That said, they really haven't set the world on fire, and that seems to remain true with this one. I do wonder what the future for this series might be. That brings us to Pokemon. Oh my goodness. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet dropped this week, and the review cycle has not been kind to it. To be fair, it still achieved a respectable 77 on OpenCritic, but this is one of the lowest ever scores for a mainline Pokemon game. Why scores so low, you ask? Well, it's not about the game itself, apparently, since almost everyone agrees that this is a pretty great Pokemon title, with some nice additions to the formula and some great art design. Many are saying that it is the most fun they've had with Pokemon in years. But the performance and the bugs, my god, this is catastrophically bad. A title so half-baked that it gives Cyberpunk on last-gen consoles a run for its money. The internet is awash with GIFs and clips showing off just how bad it all is, with the blame being shared between Nintendo's aging hardware and Game Freak, who despite having more money than all the gods combined, still run a skeleton staff of less than 200 people and crank out at least one new game every single year. Pokemon has been pretty shit for a while. I've said as much when I reviewed Sword and Shield a while back. The Switch is capable of more than Game Freak are extracting from it, and if they were willing to skip a release or two and actually invest in a new technical foundation for their games, they could deliver something worthy of this franchise and its fandom. Will that ever happen though? Definitely not. So while things will certainly improve inch by inch, I'm sure this won't be the last half-baked, janky Pokemon game we're ever gonna see. So what's coming out this week? Not a whole lot actually, but kicking things off and up and then air juggling it with a 6-shooter is Evil West, which arrives on all platforms bar the Switch today. Now, I just reviewed this one, link below the like button. I loved this a lot. It's kind of dumb and schlocky, and it has loads of throwback Xbox 360 energy, but I love games that are just video games, promising nothing more than a fun 10 hours or so, charging a fair price for it, while also being technically polished, which sadly is a big rarity these days. Evil West ticked all of those boxes for me, so while it's far from innovative, it was so much fun and I ended up strongly recommending it. I probably have the most positive review out there for this game, since most reviews landed in that 7-ish out of 10 territory, with the title sitting at a strong 76 on OpenCritic. IGN summed it up well with their 7 out of 10 review, saying, quote, Evil West is far from the most complex or innovative action game around, but it nails the most important parts of its old school monster killing campaign, end quote. Totally agree with that. However, Glitched Africa sums up the more critical reviews, scoring it a 6 out of 10 and saying, quote, Evil West slowly falls to pieces in its 13-hour campaign due to its weak story, horrid writing, and shoddy visuals. The only thing left standing is the combat, and even that gets repetitive and shallow after a while, end quote. So look, long story short, is this good? Shrug emoji. If you're keen for some straightforward fun, you'll probably enjoy yourself, but if you're looking for something more complicated, then probably stick with God of War for now. Gungrave Gore is, funnily enough, kind of similar to Evil West in that it's got that throwback energy, only this time it's PS2 rather than Xbox 360. This one is dropping today for all platforms bar the Switch. Reviews for this one dropped yesterday, and they aren't the best, sadly. It's sitting at a weak 60 on OpenCritic, with reviews tending towards the idea that too much nostalgia can be a bad thing. GameSpew scored this one a 5 out of 10, saying, quote, "There's simply not enough variety to be found in this action-packed third-person shooter. Eventually, it begins to feel like a test of your endurance rather than your gaming skills," end quote. Luckily, the stakes are pretty low for this one since it is on Game Pass, which seems like it might be the best way to check it out if you're at all curious. Just Dance fans, it's that time of the year again. This is a yearly franchise, right? I actually don't know, to be honest, since all of my info about this game comes from the intro sequences to the Ubisoft E3 press conferences, so when they aren't hosting those, then this game completely evaporates from my memory. Regardless, Just Dance 2023 drops today for next-gen consoles and the Switch. PC, I guess they just don't get it. I don't know why. I'd love to stand there dancing in front of my 27-inch PC monitor or in front of my Steam Deck, but I guess Ubisoft head honchos aren't willing to tap into that sizable and lucrative market. Their loss. And finally, Ship of Fools today arrives on all platforms. This is the one I shouted out last week in my Put This On Your Radar segment. A cute, fun-looking roguelike co-op game where you have to crew and maintain a ship while getting waylaid by all manner of quirky threats. Looking fun, looking wholesome, grab it if you're down for some solo or co-op fun. One other thing to keep an eye out for next week, so put this on your radar. If Metroidvanias are your thing, then meet The Night Witch. This one comes from developer Super Mega Team, who were doing mobile stuff before this. I believe this is their first PC and console release, and it's looking pretty special. Some great artwork and some high-quality neo-classical music create a great first impression, and the platforming bullet hell hybrid gameplay looks deep enough to keep you around for the long haul. Learning different spells and meeting different characters seems to aim at fleshing the experience out even further, and there's even some deck building thrown in, because it wouldn't be an indie game in 2022 without some deck building. No, but it actually does look pretty cool. And it's published by Team 17, who have a superb track record. You don't need to trust that or me, since there is a demo up on Steam right now if you'd like to check it out. And the release for it is pretty soon. It hits on the 29th for all platforms. If you'd like to wishlist it or take a closer look, I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and only a few things to shout out this week as we round out the month. The first is Epic, who right now are giving away some free stuff for Battle Royale wrestling game Rumbleverse. Meant to be pretty good, that one, actually. There's also Dark Deity, the old school style top-down Fire Emblem-esque RPG, which seems to have been received pretty well. And of course, the Evil Dead game, which takes the asymmetrical multiplayer format and drops it into the Evil Dead universe with all of its ridiculous characters, weapons, and monsters, and all that sort of stuff. Grab those before the 24th, though, because at that point they'll disappear to be replaced with Star Wars Squadrons, the exclusively first-person spaceship shooter, and perhaps one of the most immersive and authentic Star Wars games ever made. Playing it on a TV is fine, but if you're lucky enough to have a VR headset, then you are in for one of the best VR experiences ever, and one of the best Star Wars experiences outside of the original trilogy. A worthy addition to any library, and a very compelling reason to boot up the Epic launcher, since you probably don't boot it up all that often, unless you play Fortnite. Something tells me you guys probably don't play Fortnite, though. Let me know in the comments below if you play Fortnite. Everybody else, please respect their choices. Don't bully them. Or at least be gentle. Okay, so Game Pass is absolutely popping off this month. We've already talked about Gungrave Gore hitting the service today, but it's also getting Soccer Story, which is a cute RPG soccer game hybrid thing. Looks delightful, though no connection to Golf Story. That is a different developer and publisher. Norco was one of the most celebrated narrative releases of the year, and June Spice Wars is still only in early access, but it has been getting rave reviews across the board. As strong as all that stuff is, it's first-person shooter fans that are eating super well this month thanks to Game Pass. The excellent Insurgency Sandstorm is on there, but only for cloud and console. On the 30th, Warhammer 40k Darktide hits the service, but only for PC. I'm playing through that right now. I love it, it's amazing, but goddamn does it run like shit. More to say on that one later. Speaking of running like shit, Battlefield 2042 also arrives on Game Pass this month, specific to the Ultimate tier, since that includes access to EA Play, which is EA's subscription service. In 2042's defense, reports are that it has substantially improved since launch, but it's still far from being the game anyone had hoped it would be. The Game Pass launch coincides with the launch of Season 3 in 2042, delivering a new map, new kit, and a new specialist. I do not plan to go back to this game anytime soon. I will wait for the next one, but devoted Battlefield fans who are sticking it out, I hope this update delivers. Our feel-good story for the week is... Look, it's a Pokemon bug, okay? That's literally all it is, but it's the best thing I've seen in months, possibly all year, so just take a look. Ah yes, everyone's favorite Pokemon, Diglett, using his most powerful move, Diglett Slap. As much as we complain about Pokemon, part of me hopes it stays just as it is forever and ever. Thank you, Game Freak, and thank you, Diglett. Guys, that is the show for the week. Thank you so much for setting aside some of your time to come and hang out. I always appreciate it. I know Austin does too, even if he has to put up with me absolutely butchering my script reads each and every week. One day we'll show you some outtakes. It's not pretty. If you enjoyed yourself at all or found something useful, then could I politely request a pressing of that like button, since that's a huge help to the channel, giving the algorithm gods their tribute. I don't think I'm uploading anything else this week, but next week is gonna be big with the Callisto Protocol, Midnight Suns, and maybe even Need for Speed Unbound if I can squeeze it in. If you want to be here for it, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and ding the notification bell so you won't miss a video. Thank you again for watching, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, Kingston. So you may not know this, but DDR4 memory, which is probably what you have installed on your PC right now, released back in 2014. That is 8 years ago, just a little bit after the release of the PS4 and the Xbox One. Well, consoles have had a new generation since then, GPUs have had like 4 generations since then, and RAM has had 0. Until recently, when DDR5 RAM arrived ready to carry the PC industry forward for the foreseeable future. And thanks to Kingston, I've been lucky enough to get my hands on some. I'm talking about the Kingston Fury Renegade DDR5 RGB, which supports up to 6,400 megatransfers a second, while sporting some very sexy looking customizable RGB. This is it here, plugged into my test bench PC so you can see it nice and clearly. As you can see, a very sexy piece of kit and plenty powerful too. Kingston Fury DDR5 provides an immediate plug and play speed increase of 50% versus DDR4, and its head spread design ensures maximum cooling efficiency for reliable performance. It's also Intel XMP 3.0 certified, meaning that you can overclock it to 6,000 megatransfers a second with just a single click. As RGB is the most important feature in any gaming related product, Kingston didn't cut any corners here either. It looks plenty snazzy when seated, and Kingston's control software lets you customize RGB color for each stick, allowing you to apply effects that will make your rig look even more flashy than ever before. I personally like the default setting the most, but maybe you like something different. RAM is an integral part of any system. You can have a top-of-the-line CPU and GPU, but if you skimp out on your RAM, then you're really bottlenecking your machine. Load times, multitasking, stability, all of it becomes better when you've got the right RAM powering your rig. And I'm very pumped to finally have the next generation of RAM installed in my machine. This helps out when I'm editing, when I'm recording footage, when I'm playing, whatever I'm doing, DDR5 is going to be putting in the work. And it's just nice to know that I won't need to worry about that again for another 6 or 7 years. Most likely. If you'd like to grab some of the Kingston Fury Renegade DDR5 RGB, I've left a link to the product page below. Give it a click and future-proof your rig. Thanks Kingston for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.